welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the April 3rd, 2018 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. Yes, I said April. I know outside it seems like it's February, but it is in fact April 3rd, 2018, so welcome. It is my privilege to call tonight's meeting to order. There are copies of our agenda on either side of the room. If you haven't already done so, you can pick up a copy and follow along with our proceedings tonight. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to the items that are on our agenda tonight, as well as a segment under item 4, which is reserved for public comments of a general nature with respect to items that are not on tonight's agenda. At that point, anyone wishing to ask a question or make a comment to the council with respect to things not on tonight's agenda, I'll ask you to please come down to the podium, tell us who you are, and we'll welcome hearing from you at that time. But first, it is our proud custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So we ask everyone present to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for joining us in reciting the pledge. And it would only be fitting before we call the roll to acknowledge we have a couple of scouts here in the audience tonight. We have one in the back who's working on citizenship and communication. Thank you, good to see you. And we also have a scout here who deserves some special recognition. I want to introduce Matthew Perry, or Matt Perry, excuse me, because he's not in trouble, so it's Matt Perry. Matt's with Troop 57, affiliated with St. Paul's United Church, and Matt's here tonight working on his communication badge. Communication merit badge, lest I forget that word. I think it's important to point out that this is Matt's last merit badge of 23 merit badges. That's quite an accomplishment that you've been able to earn in the past six years of Boy Scouting. So you've got some work cut out for you, but you've got some pretty good role models here. Matt has completed his Eagle project and is finishing up his Life Scout rank on the way to Eagle. And I have to say that I've had the honor and the privilege over the last 7 years as mayor to attend a number of honor courts where scouts have made Eagle Scout. And each and every single time I am simply blown away by the maturity and the dedication and the character and integrity of those who achieve the rank of Eagle Scout. So congratulations to you upon achieving that, and good luck with everything. And I know we're going to have another Eagle Scout in the back. He's already working on it. He's got a smile on his face. You are the leaders of the future, and I think we're in very good hands. So congratulations in advance. I just thought that was the time to do it right after the Pledge of Allegiance. So with that, I would now like to ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please call the roll. And by the way, April has this whole month named after her. That was very nice of us.
But I wasn't born in April. Commissioner Wallace? Here. Commissioner Earl? Here. Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner Blake?
Here.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here, thank you very much. That brings us to item 3, which pertains to minutes of prior council meetings that we are to approve. We have one set of minutes to approve from our regular village council meeting of March 13th, 2018. If there are no changes, corrections, comments, or concerns, I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes as presented, please.
Right now, I move that this council approve the meeting minutes for March 13th, 2018 as presented. Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes are approved. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we are at item 4, which, as highlighted earlier, pertains to public comments of a general nature with respect to items that are not on tonight's agenda. If any members of the audience have any questions or comments of a general nature with respect to things that are not on tonight's agenda, please come to the podium, and we would welcome hearing from you at this time. All right, very good. That will move us right to item 5, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Right now, I move that this council approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second. Are there any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items on tonight's consent agenda? Are there any questions or comments from members of the village council? May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace? Aye. Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to item 6, which is our active agenda. We have no items on tonight's active agenda, so we will go right to item 7, which is our first reading or our workshop agenda. This is where items are presented for discussion and consideration only. No final action will be taken at this point in time. What is customary is that I will introduce our village manager, David Fieldman, who will then either himself or through one of our outstanding staff members present the item for consideration and discussion. Mr. Fieldman, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Cullen and Council. Tonight, the entire first reading of 4 items, but really 2 topics, will be presented by our outstanding staff member, Stan Popovich, who happens to be our Community Development Director. Stan.
Stan, who is in fact standing. Good evening. Welcome.
I am standing. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. The first 2 items are regarding a rezoning and a platted subdivision of the property at 2200 Warrenville Road. Property is in the northwest quadrant of town at the corner of Warrenville and Finley Road here, circled in yellow. If we zoom in a little bit, property is outlined in green. It consists of 3 lots. 2 of the lots face Warrenville Road, and the 3rd lot is a former NICOR parcel that is adjacent to the tollway there. The first part of the petition is to do a platted subdivision, which would then create 1 lot of record for the applicant. The second part is that the current parcel is partially zoned ORM, and the former NICOR property is zoned M1. So the other request would be to rezone the entire property to ORM, so it's a single zoning classification for a redevelopment of the property into an office, warehouse, and distribution facility. With regard to the comprehensive plan, the plan notes as an office corporate campus location to improve business park areas, attract temporary users, and minimize residential impacts. So this plan does meet all of those requirements, and the Plan Commission found that the rezoning criteria and the platted subdivision criteria were met at their meeting last month. Kevin Shields with Green Bay Packaging is here as well, if you have any questions for him. If I can answer any questions, I'd be happy to do that as well.
Very good. Thank you for the presentation. At this point, I'll ask if the petitioner would like to add anything further, or we can always wait until after the council members ask questions. It's more informal than a regular meeting. Sounds like that's it for now. All right, and that's with respect to all 4 items.
That's with respect to the first 2 items.
The first 2 items. Thank you for clarification. All right, then on the first 2 items, any questions or comments from members of the village council?
Seems very straightforward.
It does indeed. Commissioner Earl?
Saw this at Plan Commission, and welcome to Green Bay Packaging. We're excited to have you.
Thank you. We're excited to come to Downers Road.
Well, I'll second that. Thank you.
Okay, no further questions from the council. Now, any questions or comments from the audience with respect to the first 2 items, items 7A and B, with respect to the rezoning and the final plat of subdivision? All right, very good. Then we'll move on to the next ones.
Move on to the next 2 items, which is an annexation and rezoning at 6140 Boundary Road. The property is on the southwest side of town here, just a little bit north of 63rd Street. The property here is outlined in red. It's located at the intersection of Lee Street and Boundary Court. The property outlined here in red is a vacant parcel of land. What you can see here is the area outlined in yellow is actually unincorporated Downers Grove. So the property is really surrounded by Downers Grove on the east, the north, and the south as well. Petitioner just wants to build a new single-family home there, connect to the water, to provide water to the property. Upon annexation, the property would automatically be zoned to R1. The petitioner is requesting a rezoning to R3. The property is to the east and around the corner zoned R3. The rezoning to an R3, the lot's only about 120 feet deep on the south side there, so by having an R3, you get to move 10 feet closer to the front property line, which gives them a little bit more of the backyard. So those are the requests for this one tonight. With this property, the comprehensive plan notes it's single-family detached housing, traditional grid. We want to provide a variety of housing, and housing stock is one of the key things for the village. And then the Plan Commission found that the rezoning criteria were met during their meeting last month. If I can answer any questions for you tonight, Mayor, I'd be happy to do that as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Popovich. Any questions or comments on these 2 items from members of the village council?
Once again, straightforward.
It is indeed. We like welcoming people to the village, so there's a nice theme tonight. Questions or comments from members of the audience on these 2 items? All right, very good. Straightforward is the theme. Thank you, Mr. Popovich. Very straightforward.
That ends our first reading tonight, Mayor.
Thank you very much. And these items would come to the council for vote
Next, I'm sorry, 2 weeks.
2 weeks from now, right?
2 weeks.
For those keeping score. Thank you. All right, very good. Well, that brings us to the, thank you very much. Well, hopefully I kept that relatively painless. That brings us to the end of the first reading, as Manager Fieldman indicated. It brings us to item 8, which is the mayor's report. I have a few items to mention. First of all, I think unless you were on Mars, you were obviously aware that one of Downers Grove's own, Kendall Gretsch, actually did quite amazing in the 2018 Paralympics. And after the dust settles, one of the things that we have communicated is we certainly want to extend our appreciation and recognition to Kendall for some outstanding accomplishments in this year's games, including an invitation to, of course, be the Grand Marshal in our Independence Day Parade. I know a number of different residents had reached out to me and said, wow, that's fantastic, and one of Downers Grove's own has achieved such amazing things. Can't we recognize her somehow? And of course, we plan to do so, so I wanted to share that with everyone. Of course, subject to Kendall's schedule. Next, I wanted to, I'm all full of good news tonight. Next thing I wanted to mention is that the Downers Grove Police Department, and Chief Shannon Gillette in particular, has announced some terrific news that the Downers Grove Police Department has been awarded the Gold Standard Accreditation with Excellence from CALEA, otherwise known as the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. The department also received the Meritorious Award for achieving 15 or more consecutive years of accreditation, which is a new milestone for the Village of Downers Grove. The accreditation with excellence is the highest level of recognition that can be awarded by the Commission. Only about 4% of law enforcement agencies in the United States have ever achieved accreditation like this through CALEA, and this is the second time in a row, if I'm correct, for the Village of Downers Grove, which I believe someone has recently said to me is almost unheard of. So this is another level of exceptional accomplishment by the Village of Downers Grove Police Department, and having been through a number of the post-review meetings from the outside auditors, I guess you would call them. I know that's the wrong word. Judy will yell at me. But those who come from CALEA, from outside agencies, and assess our department here, I know that it is a very rigorous process. It takes a great deal of work by our department to put together the materials and demonstrate the highest levels of excellence that results in this achievement. So I have a small but great appreciation for the amount of effort that goes into achieving this, and so we want to certainly make sure the community is aware of that, but also to extend our terrific appreciation to Chief Gillette and Deputy Chiefs DeVries and McGreal and all the staff at the Downers Grove Police Department for really exceptional accomplishment. And of course, Chief Gillette, being a very humble person, would of course also want me to say thanks to Chief Robert Porter, our former police chief, and former Chief Kurt Bluter as well as Accreditation Manager Marion Hines, all who played a big role in achieving this. So we want to make sure that we extend our congratulations and appreciation to all of them. But of course, the fire department, not to be outdone. Today was another day of good news. We were at a photo shoot, if you will believe that. The Northern Illinois Fire Sprinkler Advisory Board issued an award recently to the Village of Downers Grove Fire Department for its efforts to ensure that sprinkler and fire protection systems are maintained to NFPA standards. The recognition will be included in an upcoming issue of Illinois Fire Chiefs Magazine, along with the Illinois Municipal League magazine, and this piece will include photos of various officials involved with these efforts, thus the photo shoot this morning, so you all missed out on that. So look for that in an upcoming issue, and we, of course, are very grateful to Midwestern University for hosting the photo shoot and the actual sprinkler room that is featured in the piece. And similarly, I want to thank Chief Mendelski and Deputy Chief Spinazzola and Tasso and their staff for all their accomplishments in that regard in achieving that recognition. And then I could say it now, or I could say that, of course, Commissioner Wallace will be talking about the really big trucks event that's coming up. I'm sure that'll be in a report at some point in time. And with that, I will end my report and turn over to item 9, which is the manager's report. Back to you, Mr. Fieldman. Oh, wait a second. Hold that thought. We're going to pause the manager's report because we're going to go and finish up the rest of the agenda. The manager's report is going to take place in the committee room tonight across the hall. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish the agenda, then we're going to take a brief recess. We're going to go across the hall to the committee room, and we will take up the stormwater regulations discussion as part of the manager's report at that point in time.
Mayor Tully, do you want me to read the resolution appointing?
Yes, as part of my, I had so many notes about good news, I wrote over that. So yes, we also have something else that's very important to do under my report tonight, which is we have a resolution appointing a resident to one of our boards and commissions. And as is customary, I ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please read the resolution so we can vote on the appointment, which would be a good thing to do.
A resolution appointing Jillian A. Murcutt to the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners. Whereas Mayor Tully has made the following appointment to the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners, and now therefore be it resolved that the Village Council of the Village of Downers Grove does hereby confirm the following appointment. Board of Fire and Police Commissioners appoint Jillian A. Murcutt to a 3-year term expiring August 31, 2021.
Do I have a motion to make that appointment?
Mayor Tulley, I move that the council approve the appointment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from the council? I will just thank Jillian for volunteering to serve. This is an important board and commission, as all our board and commissions are. This will be Jillian's first time serving on one of our board and commissions, so we're grateful for her willingness to serve the community in this role, as we are all the members of the community that serve on our various boards and commissions. So we welcome her to the board and commission. Jillian could not be here tonight, but I'm sure she'll be watching at home, and we'll be looking forward to serving in this new role and learning more about the process going forward. So we welcome her and thank her for her service. And with that, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Burnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The appointment is approved unanimously, so welcome, Jillian, and thank you. And with that, I'm just all out of good news. So now we're going to go to item 10. Remembering we're going to come back to item 9 in the committee room, so we're going to jump to item 10, our village attorney's report. Ms. Petrarca, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. 3 items to present this evening. The first is an ordinance rezoning a portion of certain property located at 2200 Warrenville Road, an ordinance annexing 6140 Boundary Road to the Village of Downers Grove, and an ordinance rezoning certain property located at 6140 Boundary Road. They will all appear on the April 17th active. Thank you, Mayor.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Now we'll move to item 11, which is reserved for council member reports. This is an opportunity for members of the village council to share with their colleagues either items of interest in their roles as liaisons to other public bodies, or to share with those present here tonight and watching at home items of interest and other goings on in the community. So I will start with my right tonight, Commissioner Jose. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Since Commissioner Wallace has wheelie big trucks covered, I have no report. Thank you.
No pressure. Commissioner Barnett.
No report, Mayor.
Commissioner Waldeck.
Yes, Mayor. Our Downtown Management Corporation is looking for volunteers for the car shows that'll occur on Fridays, starting near the end of May and going to the end of August. Just volunteers to help with traffic in the afternoons. And also, there's a lot of events. If you go on the website, it's like something there every day. So I suggest you go to downtowndg.org and check the calendar, and there's something you can do there every day. So please do so, and it's a good way to get involved in the community. Thanks, Mayor.
As they say, something's always up in Downers Grove, right, Commissioner?
Here we go.
Commissioner Barnett. I'm sorry. I was going to ask Commissioner Barnett again.
Maybe he changed his answer.
He had that look on his face. Commissioner Earl.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, well, we got to say Commissioner Wallace for last. Commissioner White.
No report.
All right, so with plenty of time to prepare, Commissioner Wallace, is there anything going on with Passport to Safety
Yes,
and
now I
really big
have a
trucks?
couple things to announce, Mayor. Thank you. First is Passport to Safety and Willie Big Trucks, which is on Saturday from 10 to noon at the Lincoln Center. So bring the kids, sponsored by the Downers Grove Park District, Fire Department, Police Department. Passport to Safety gives safety tips for children of all ages. Kids get a passport at the beginning of the event, and then they get to meet local safety personnel, learn important tips to keep them safe, and then they can go outside and touch the trucks and climb all over them, and you can take pictures. The next event is the Mustang Trot 5K Run and Walk, which is taking place this Sunday at 9 a.m. at Downers Grove South High School. You can still sign up at mustangtrot.weebly.com. I will be running with my youngest this year. And then lastly, I just want to offer congratulations to the Downers Grove Police Department. Over spring break, my daughter, actually the day that this was announced, said that she wanted to do something nice for someone. So the next day, we took over some treats and were able to congratulate them in person. And then another congratulations to the Downers Grove Fire Department as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Terrific. Well done, Commissioner. And I'm very, very depressed now because I'm going to lose that race to your daughter.
You never know.
So there goes my self-esteem. And I just have nothing further to report for myself. So what we are going to do is I'm going to ask for a motion to recess to the committee room, and we will pick up with the manager's report, item 9, which is discussion of potential amendments to the stormwater management regulations at that point in time. So we invite all of you to join us next door in probably about 10 minutes.
Mayor, I move that this council recess to the committee room to consider the manager's report.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion to recess to the committee room is granted. We'll resume over there in about 10 minutes. Thank you. We're now going to take up the item on tonight's agenda under the manager's report, which pertains to the village's discussion of potential amendments to our stormwater management regulations. As some of you know, this is a conversation that we've been having for some time. This is the next installment. So with that, I will turn things over to our village manager, David Fieldman, to introduce our current status. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just as background, the issue we're talking about is the fact that code-compliant development activities sometimes cause drainage issues on their neighboring properties, even though they comply with the code. And so our objectives on this are to reduce those negative impacts of runoff caused by development activity, but still accommodate residential expansion in terms of renovation and redevelopment. We have several challenges here in Downers Grove that we've gone over. Lack of stormwater infrastructure in about a third of the town. Development pressures happening in these exact parts of town. They're very desirable for a number of other reasons. We have unique soil conditions where water does not drain through. There's high clay content. So we have a lot of issues of not having a place to capture the water, and then when it hits the ground and goes underground, it doesn't absorb in, it runs off on the neighboring properties, and that is a sort of unique circumstances. One of the greatest challenges in this project has been achieving this balance between reducing negative impacts of runoff caused by new houses and housing additions while still allowing those types of improvements to occur. And striking that balance has been a real challenge, and we've been at this now for, oh my gosh, 5-6 months, 5 or so council meetings. As a reminder, when we talk about the stormwater management system, there are really two components to it. There's the public system, which, as its name would suggest, stores and conveys runoff on a village-wide basis, all throughout our community. And it's made up of public improvements, pipes in the streets, inlets, big detention basins. Think about storing and moving rainwater throughout the entire community. This is the system, and we say one of the challenges is we lack some stormwater infrastructure. There are parts of town that don't have any stormwater infrastructure. But we are making headway on those issues on this part of the system using money through our stormwater utility. We're doing maintenance activities of the parts of the systems that already exist, and we're expanding the system, targeting capital projects and improvements in areas that are not served at all or underserved. We have about 20 projects on the books getting ready to go that we'll be building over the next several years. We've already built about 25 projects, about $30 million worth of improvements over the last decade or so. We are not talking primarily about this system tonight. Tonight, in this project, we're talking about on-site localized drainage systems, the private portion of the drainage system. This part of the system stores and conveys runoff on a single property. You're talking about lot-to-lot, neighbor-to-neighbor drainage issues as opposed to village-wide flooding issues. So the on-site drainage system, the private system, consists of private improvements which are funded by the property owner or builder in a lot of the cases we're talking about. And the village's role in this primarily is we're not involved in building and maintaining the system. We set the rules, the regulations that the private sector has to follow to make sure that this system operates correctly and mitigates the impact of runoff. To effectively manage stormwater as a system, these two components of the system have to be integrated. They have to work together. And if we were starting with a blank slate, like a brand new subdivision, the two systems would be designed to work together. Think about farm field development and how private system connects to public system and it all works together. The challenge here in our village is we are trying to retroactively integrate both systems. We have a partially completed public system. We have a lot of houses built in areas that don't have even an on-site drainage system, and as redevelopment occurs, we're trying to marry up and integrate those two systems. The challenge is we will frankly never be as effective as if we were starting with a blank slate, a green field. There's too many challenges, too many fixed points, too many obstacles. That doesn't mean we're going to stop looking for ways to improve. That's what we're doing here tonight, and that's what we're doing with this public system. So we're constantly looking for ways to improve the management of stormwater. A lot of times you'll hear the word solution or solving. It's good to strive for, but this idea that you can solve stormwater, that at some point it won't be an issue, is really a misnomer. And the reason for that is no matter what any community builds, there will always be a storm or series of storms which exceed the capacity of those systems. So really what we're into here on both the public side and the private side is looking for ways to improve and enhance, always striving for a solution, but we really can't say we'll ever be in a position to solve stormwater. Okay, with that as the background, we mentioned earlier that the council's been working on this for several months over several meetings. At the last meeting, the council asked us to look into a series of regulations that would be supported by recaptures, a variation system, and village financial participation. Staff analyzed those issues since the last meeting and found that for a variety of reasons that system really won't be effective or meet either the council's expectations or the residents' expectations. And we have information about that in the staff report that is posted online. But we were, as a staff, able to come up with some proposed regulations which we think meets the direction that the council has provided. And here they are. So the proposed regulations. Detention or stormwater storage would be required for all new single-family houses and all major additions to houses as defined as any addition which expands the footprint and alters 600 square feet or more of the property. So detention is required for all new homes and major additions. There's two ways this detention would be provided. First way is if your property has the ability to connect the on-site drainage system to the public system. In other words, if you can make that work by gravity without pumps, and if the public system is within 200 feet of your property, then you would provide 100% of the storage volume required. Standard full amount, 100%. We found in the last couple of meetings that there will be occasions where the public system is more than 200 feet away and that the gravity system won't work because the pipes in the street are higher than the pipes would be on the lot, if you will. It would require pumps. So to make sure that stormwater is effectively managed in these situations, the requirement would be a storage basin with 150% of the detention volume. So upsize the detention. And that would be in cases when you can't do it by gravity and the system is more than 200 feet away. Now, if somebody has a situation and the system is 200 feet away or more, they could still choose to connect to it and provide the 100%. But in any case, they would have to do one or the other. So we are providing an element of choice here as well. You can see that these proposed regulations are a big enhancement, large enhancement over our current regulations. Our current regulations, they call post-construction best management practices, very small basins, rain gardens, etc., that are not connected to our public system, only in cases where the lot is improved with 700 square feet more impervious area. It's only been, I think around 20% of the new houses have fallen into that category. And under our existing regulations, full detention is only required when you do a development that has 25,000 square feet of net new impervious. These talking about full detention for all new houses and major additions, so a significant enhancement. We wanted to take a look at sort of the applicability and the effectiveness of these regulations. So in the first category, detention with a connection to the public system, a review of our records shows that about 67, 2/3 of the brand new houses would fall into this category, and about 5% of all the additions would also fall into this category. So they'd be providing the detention with a connection. How effective would that be? Very effective in the sense that statistically, if you look at it, this size of detention would handle about 99 out of 100 storms in any given year. Again, it's not every storm, it's not every situation, but the vast majority of storms, these systems would be effectively managing stormwater runoff. The cost, if you were to have the public system pipe right in front of your house, you're probably talking about $15,000 to $30,000 for the detention and the connection. If you have to run up to 200 feet of public system pipe to make that connection, it's in the 35, maybe 50,000. On rare occasions, it could get up to 80,000. We think that's extremely rare. Remember from our last meeting, that would be a sort of every improvement in your way. So about 35 to 50 maybe, sometimes up to 80. In the second category, if you could not make the connection and you had to upsize your basin by 50%, we think that's the remaining 1/3 of new single-family houses and about 3% of all additions to houses. So you'll see that the major addition category is about 8 to 10% of all additions that we're currently experiencing. How effective is this? We think with this amount of detention, it's a very similar amount of risk mitigation or protection, that this basin would be overtopped in only around fewer than 5% of the storms. So 95 to 99% of the storms should be effectively managed in this situation. Cost, because you're upsizing the system significantly, would be a little more money, $22,000 to $45,000, maybe $50,000 to comply with the regulations in this fashion. So one of the great things about this approach is that the solution and the compliance happens on-site. This is an on-site set of solutions, and the likelihood of asking for some variation has been minimized. There are some factors which would limit a property's ability to comply or be effective, and they're listed here. Number one is a high water table. If there's groundwater not too deep below the surface, there's not a lot of room to provide this detention storage, right? So the higher the water table, the less area you have for detention. Similarly, if we come across property that's almost 100% clay and has a very low infiltration rate, then these underground basins probably won't be very effective because the water will go into them and not have anywhere to go. It'll take days, sometimes months for it to drain out. So they'll not likely be able to comply with such a low infiltration rate. The third area is if you have like what we call a special management area. So if your property has a floodplain on it, a wetland, something like that already, where water already stores in a rain event, it's very difficult to provide extra storage in places that are already storing water. There just usually isn't enough room on your property. So these are the factors in which we would expect somebody to apply for a variation. Great thing about this is we can use our existing standards and variation process found in our existing code. These are characteristics you can document and measure. They're unique to the property. Therefore, they're based on physical conditions of the property. We estimate that about 5%, maybe 5 a year, 5 or so variations a year based on a look back of our data. So a very low percentage of permits. So that's the work that staff has done since the last meeting. We think it is meeting the goals and direction from the council. 100% with a connection, 150% without a connection. Before we turn it over to the council for further discussion, our staff members came across a video, a portion of the program, This Old House, where they actually, there was a community outside of Boston that has this kind of requirement, and they were doing a garage addition. and they actually show in the video exactly what we're talking about, and we thought it'd be nice to show it. I think we have to sit through a State Farm ad first, but we'll see how it goes. Right after the stained glass window.
When it rains here in Newton,
Here's our State Farm ad. We knew it was coming.
When the unexpected happens to your old house, State Farm is here to help life go right. Proud sponsor of this old house for over 25 years.
all that rainwater runoff, roofs and gutters and driveways, it all goes into a town storm drainage system, which is old and overwhelmed. So when we add new buildings like a garage here, which means less ground to absorb the rainwater and more roof surface to shed it, well, the town requires that we deal with the runoff. And Roger, that explains the massive hole that is now in our backyard.
Yeah, it's 8 feet wide, 7 feet deep, and it's an engineered trench for us to control water. We moved 100 yards of material to prep this hole. Once we had it down that deep, we put down the fabric on the sides, and in the bottom we're putting in a foot of stone to lay these galleys or dry wells on.
This is the galley right here, this tank coming in?
This is the main part of the system. There's going to be 8 of those set in per the engineer's spec, and they'll all lock up together, and then we'll do a couple other things to control the rest of the water.
And how long is this trench?
36 feet.
That's a big hole.
Yep. So these concrete bins are open in the middle. The water goes inside and then slowly drains down into the ground.
And are they piped together, or are they just sort of...
No, they're just sort of meshed together. They don't have to be watertight, so if a little water comes out, it's not going to make any.
Right.
We want the water to come out. Each one of these galleys will hold 300 gallons of water, so we're looking at 2,400 gallons just in the galleys alone. Right. But with the stone that's here, it's going to even hold more water than that.
And so this is underneath the driveway, so obviously they're built to be able to drive a car over this area when it's filled.
Right, this is what's called H20 or heavy-duty tank, so you can drive over it. And you can see also there's a clean out in the top. There's going to be, to make sure if debris gets in there, we can take it away.
This is a lot of engineering. What does this thing cost?
This is a lot of engineering and a lot of work, and it's probably going to be about $25,000 by the time we're done.
Well, that's unbelievable. And obviously not a surprise to the homeowners, right?
No, this was all figured right from the get-go in the beginning, because you can't get a building permit without doing this work.
You pull a permit, they tell you got to do this. So he's starting with a little bit of the backfill, huh?
Right, he wants to start from the back and work his way out as he's setting the galleys. Kevin, this fabric you see all the way around the edge is a soil separator. What it does, it keeps all the fines that are in the soil from getting into the stone and all the voids we have inside it.
Essentially, you don't want this system to clog up.
No.
It's amazing to think, Roger, that, prior to this, they used to just use the gutters from the house and the sewers in the street, and now, look at all this engineering.
Yeah, the engineering took into consideration a lot of things. Number one was they did a perk test to test the soil to see how fast the water would go through it. Number two is impervious surface. You got a roof you got to take into calculations, and the driveway, and all that water that runs off of that, you got to control. So they figured this system for a 100-year storm. Now, in a 100-year storm, you're going to get 9 inches of rain over 24 hours.
Holy mackerel. That's an insane amount of water.
Well, with all the tanks in, you can now start backfilling. You're going to take his backfill all the way to the top and up about a foot above the tank. But he's still got some other stuff to do. He's got to cut the driveway, put in a trench drain that'll tie in there, and collect that downspout and run it into the house.
A lot of work, right?
A lot of work.
Hey, Tommy.
Hey, boy, a lot of work just to...
So we want to thank our friends at This Old House for giving us a time demonstration of what this would look like. That's exactly what we're talking about. You heard him say the 100-year event and the 9 inches of rain in 24 hours. We try not to use that term because nobody really understands it. It's a 1% chance of happening in any given year. That's what we're talking about. It's exactly what we're sizing. So when he said 100-year event, that's what we're calling the 100% volume. When you upsize it to 150%, make that basin even 50%. more than that. So we presented a lot of information tonight. All the council members have been pre-briefed before this meeting, so they are familiar with the topic here tonight. And with that, I will turn it over to Mayor Tully.
Sure, thank you, Dave, appreciate that, especially the summary, and the visual aid was terrific. Question, though, to sort of frame our discussion, what are your expectations and what we should leave here with tonight?
So if this is to the council's liking, that we've captured your direction and key components of the proposed ordinance, we'd just like that confirmation, and then the next steps would be to invite the building community in to get their perspectives and concerns and comments. The building community would be local home builders, their architects, and their engineers. They would be invited to share their thoughts. Then we would take their thoughts and bring back to the council an actual ordinance for your consideration.
Great, thank you. All right, well, with that, I know we've been talking about this for some time. I'll open it up to the council for further conversation. Commissioner White.
I want to congratulate staff. I think this illustrates the adage that writing a short letter is much harder than writing a long one. That a truly staggering amount of data was now compressed into a very clear, succinct, and straightforward, almost like, well, yes, that's what we should do. I mean, it's just, you know, that's basically where I'm at. I know how much work that went into this. I know how many different options were considered, and I think balancing a lot of competing factors, I have no problem saying I think this is the way we should move forward.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Barnett?
I'm happy to see this progress.
Anybody not happy to see this progress?
I was just going to say, I'm good
Commissioner,
with this.
go ahead.
We've been I've been watching you do this for 10 years, Dave, and everybody else, and it's been going in circles, and we've done public stuff, and there's stormwater utility projects, and you did a whole bunch of them, and now, oh, that's what I was actually going to ask is, where can the folks who are watching find the list of public projects that are still up and coming? Because I know you redid the list after we finished some, so I think that's on the website.
Yeah, there's two places on our website to get a sense of the projects that are planned. I would start with looking at the 2014 stormwater project analysis that has a list of many projects in priority order and gives some preliminary cost estimates. That's the list we're working from. But the second place I would look is in the 2018 Community Investment Program. It's part of our budget, so click on the budget link, go to the Community Investment Program link, and there's a list of stormwater projects in that document.
And that's like the next 5 years' worth.
And that's about 5 years, and it indicates those with much more detail on the projects planned for this year. And if anybody has any questions, please call the manager's office or Public Works, and we're happy to walk you through any questions you may have.
Okay, and this is all just stuff that's pertaining to the new houses, and what we keep hearing is the new construction is flooding my property. The house next door, the newly built house next door, we had no water until the house next door went in, or the addition went on the house next door. So that's all this is pertaining to, and I'm thrilled to get this far. So, well done.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm 100% on board. I think this is absolutely the right way to go, excuse me, with regard to new construction additions. I just want to reiterate that this is just for developments that are, you know, from now forward. Obviously, there's been a lot of construction, as Manager Fieldman pointed out. There's a lot of that town that doesn't have stormwater infrastructure, that has undersized infrastructure. I just want to emphasize we had a lot more work to do. This is a solution for runoff and being created by new projects.
It's an improvement, not a solution.
Exactly. It's well said, Mayor. It's merely one step in working toward improving a much larger problem. Obviously, we're doing that with investments through the stormwater utility. But I don't want folks to take their eye off the ball. I know this council won't, but I want to reiterate it for anybody watching. This is just one step. We have a lot more to do. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks. Other questions, comments from the council?
I just want to
Commissioner Wallace?
thank staff for all the hard work. I think this is a long time coming.
You know, you said you've been working on this for 5 or 6 months. In my head, I'm thinking this is years of, you know, continuing to go back and forth. So I greatly appreciate the efforts from staff and think that this is a good start.
Well, I might as well chime in.
Might as well, Commissioner Waldeck.
Well, I don't want to repeat what everybody else said. Yeah, I can support this, and I look forward to the meeting. How far out are we talking about the meeting with the construction folks and builders?
Later this month, we have
This
good
month,
ways
okay.
of reaching them. We'll probably give a 2-week notice, and Stan's team will reach out to them and get them in here.
Good.
They're not shy about giving us their opinion on regulations, so they should be able to comment quickly.
I echo what my colleagues have said in terms of the work that went into this. I remember the early challenges of trying to do an and solution, and I often describe the scene from Apollo 13 when all the stuff is dumped on the table, the engineers, and they have to figure out how to put round pegs into square holes. And I think you've done a lot of there's a lot of solving the challenges that allow us to come up with a proposal for improvement. So that's greatly appreciated. But I also want to underscore some of the things that have been said by some of my colleagues. This is a piece of a much bigger puzzle because the stormwater infrastructure management, maintenance, and new projects that deal with more regional and neighborhood solutions are not this. This is, as has been mentioned, goes to something that actually is more recent than some of our other challenges. For years and years and years, we've talked about stormwater management, water quality management, responding to requirements of the Clean Water Act and NPDES and so on and so forth, dealing with localized poor drainage areas, coming up with funding sources for bigger areas that have much more widespread improvements. But this actual limiting, I think as it was described as, let's try to minimize the new headaches going forward is relatively new. Yes, we've tried to improve stormwater regulations in the past. We tried to be least invasive, because let's face it, this is far more invasive than anything we've ever done before. We tried things that were less invasive, and they didn't work very effectively. And in the face of them not working that effectively, we had to go to something more invasive. So this is far more invasive, but it should be far more effective than what's come before. So this is very good. I mean, this is terrific. This is the next logical step. And I agree. There's a lot of work that went into it, and glad to see it continuing in going forward. I'll come back to the council for any final comments, but at this point I'll open it up to any members of the audience. Any questions or comments about where we're at this stage in the process?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Vincent Barrett, 4911, 4921 Highland Avenue. Mayor Philbin, or Manager Philbin, thanks very much for the overview. I appreciate it. I've been around the town a long time as well, and I've read in the paper, when we used to have a newspaper, about all the projects that went on, stormwater, sewer and all of that. I'm encouraged by what I see here for an immediate solution of new construction going forward. New construction going forward. All right. I think that's a good start, all right, and it seems pragmatic. What I'm also concerned about is, I don't want to be flippant in saying this, but fast tracking. And don't take that in any other way than I'm a citizen like all of you, and I pay taxes here. And because I've seen, from the sidelines, all the attempts to address our stormwater issues, especially in my neighborhood over the years, that I don't want to live another lifetime and still be reading about it in a paper we don't have anymore. So, my question would be, this first one, the on-site drainage systems, understand you're going to get contractors in, get their input. What's the plan as far as, again, I know a lot of things can happen between now and then, but what's the plan as far as to when you would present to council and say, this is our going forward plan, and have the council review that? Then I have another question.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just cast that in slightly different terms, and it was a question that was kind of asked earlier. Estimated timetable. So if we're having a meeting with the building community next month, understanding, depending on what that input is, it's going to take some time to absorb it. But what is the current expectation, reasonable, realistic expectation to deliver a proposed ordinance to the council for review?
We'd like to deliver a proposed ordinance to the council in May, hopefully early May, but we'll say May for right now.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah, they've already started, our team, Nan, Stan, their teams, and Enza have already started to work on it. This is relatively more straightforward, the way we're approaching it now, than the last iteration. So we'll present it to you as soon as we can, which we think is May. Normal procedure after that is it has to go through Stormwater and Floodplain Oversight Committee for the hearing on change to Chapter 26.
Right.
And then it comes back to the council. So that will probably be over the summer
That's
months.
the county?
That happens locally.
That's our stormwater flow.
Our own, but
Okay,
it
all right.
follows the county process, but we do it locally.
Okay.
So we have a group of citizen committee that's been appointed that will review it, give their comments, concerns, questions, and then it'll come back to council. So that's probably a throughout the summer type of timeline.
But before Labor Day, we should be.
And then, once they've had their go at it, and it comes back to us, and whatever we adopt, is there then a window as to when it goes into effect?
Short window.
60 days, 90
Yeah,
days?
short, measured in days, because once staff knows that this is looking like it's going to be passed in some form, we will begin alerting the development community, and they'll know it's coming, so we can shorten the window before the effectiveness. Many of them are already aware. We've talked to them. They understand what's about to happen.
Two things. One, relatively speaking, that's lightning fast as these things go. Number two, by design, there were more issues involved here, and we decided rather than try to eat the entire elephant and do this for years, to focus on things that we thought we could tackle and get them actually implemented. And that's part of the reason why this is able to go forward.
Good.
And you know you had another question.
Thank you. Commissioner Jose just brought up a good point about tying the two together, the public system. You mentioned there's a third of the village that doesn't have any stormwater sewer. We have a lot of impervious clay. It's a gift we got, okay? And yet people still want to move here, all right? So to me, I'm very encouraged by the on-site drainage and the fact that we could see something this year in the form of an ordinance, okay? That public system is vital. Two examples. We've got a beautiful building going up right at the tracks, Forest and the tracks. There's going to be another building going up at Rogers and Washington Street. And those are two impervious structures by definition. You know, maybe there's some green space where you're going to take your 18-inch mower and mow around it. What happens there? How does that property handle what is being proposed for, you know, a common lots, maybe 60, 70 foot by 125 foot by putting in what we saw in that film? How does the commercial property, residential property of that size handle that?
Let's start with the easy one, which is the residential property that we've been talking about. It's easy to explain, it's difficult to engineer and install. We have a little diagram here. This could be any typical lot in the village. It could be anywhere from 50 feet wide up to 85 feet wide, with the street in front and the house in the middle. What's going to happen is if you have relatively low water table and some amount of infiltration, and you have to provide 100% of the storage, you'll probably be an underground vault like we saw in the video in either the backyard or the front yard, either. If you have to provide 150%, or your lot starts to have these issues of high water table and low infiltration rate, you're talking about literally taking up the entire front yard and backyard underground, the entire yard, both yards, and under the driveway, as we saw in there with these vaults. Okay, so this could be a significant engineering, design, and construction issue. So that's how it would work for residential properties. There will be some cases on 50-foot wide lots where you'll simply run out of room to put these basins in the full amounts. Those will be the ones that will end up seeking a variation. In those cases, we'll be looking to put conditions on the development where our engineering staff will work with the design engineers, and we'll try to figure out what is the best way to mitigate negative impacts to adjoining properties. So this is the one we've been really focusing on. The ordinance itself will address commercial areas as well. Commercial areas will probably end up being underground under the building. So there's several buildings in town that have that scenario. The 4900 block of Forest, stores under the building. There's storage underneath the parking deck in our downtown. There's other examples. Okay. So they end up underneath the building, basically.
Okay. But you just gave me an idea. And this is my personal observation. I think that a 50-foot lot being built on at Downers Grove is silly. You know, I lived in Berlin for 4 years and I loved it, but I don't live in Berlin. But I live with gangways between buildings, and that's what I see on these, especially these small lots. For a living, I'm a house painter. I work alone. There are homes that I can't bid on anymore because I can't get my ladder at the correct angle. And that's okay. I just have to move on. But it tells me that these houses are very close to one another. So an idea, it's kind of crazy, but it's something you might want to kick around. Perhaps the village would go ahead and buy a piece of property that a developer wanted to develop, and it was 50 foot, and it can't be built on. And the village says, we're going to buy that, and we're going to use that as stormwater drainage for a neighborhood. Right? And
Yeah, that's
you do
actually,
We actually do that all the time.
Yeah.
That's been in our stormwater management plan for decades.
oh yeah,
that. Okay, you buy property like that?
All the time.
Okay.
we purchased them 5 to 10 in the last couple of years.
Okay, well, that's great. Good.
Right.
The other places you'll see it are on parks. We partner with the Downers Grove Park District and we build very large-scale basins like that.
We live real close, real by Washington Park, and of course we can't, you know, Washington Park, I think, drains into our backyards. I'm kidding, but we can't go to Washington Park, and that's where
Right.
we would like to go, for lack of a pump.
It's upstream, right?
Right.
Of course, the parcel acquisition depends on a number of factors, including whether the parcel would actually serve the purpose desired. Not every parcel would.
No, I understand.
The water table and other things have a lot to do with that. Number two, it's privately owned. We can't necessarily force someone to sell it to us. Well, that's certainly not a path that we enjoy taking. But also it has to be within the means available. I mean, there's only so much money. If somebody wanted $500,000 for that parcel,
I understand
Oh, I can buy it.
complicating circumstances, it's like the variations. Decided not to include every hypothetical in this so you can move forward.
Exactly.
That's a good example.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? Please. And you don't have to stand up if you don't want.
Good. I thought he was showing off.
Oh. I would expect nothing less from Vince.
Stephanie Wolf, 4925 Highland.
My neighbor.
Kind of close. So, just to kind of clarify my own head, we're still going to have, or there's something in place to have this kind of regulation on a larger development.
Yes.
So, right, they put some
Yes.
condos or whatever at Washington and Rogers, or...
Well, yeah, I don't want to speak out of turn, but just to address that, but historically, usually the big commercial developments always have some kind of on-site detention or some stormwater management built into them.
Some type.
Well,
Are they at 100, 150%?
Well, our ordinance is obviously going to address that, but there have been ordinances in place before, and depending on the type of development, and somebody will throw something at me here in a minute. We also run into the county stormwater ordinances, which come to bear on this too. Certainly, we can be more restrictive, and now Dave's going to tell me how much more restrictive we're being than what the current.
I had to check with Nando to make sure. Right now, full detention is only triggered when a development ends up with 25,000 square feet of net new impervious. So if you're starting with something that already has a great deal of impervious surface, and then you tear that down and build on top of it, you only are required to put in full detention if you increase it by 25,000. So this entire multi-month discussion has really been focusing on the residential side.
Right.
Part of the work staff and the oversight committee have to do is figure out how these concepts would apply to commercial and non-single family as well. We'll be looking to provide and require similar things. We haven't worked out those details yet, but the idea is to make those more stringent as well.
Because I'm looking at the downtown development plan, and there are a lot of properties that are currently residential with little houses on them. But yeah, if somebody buys up the block, are they going to get it that, 25,000
There's certain,
feet?
it doesn't make a lot of sense to make one house do all this stuff, and then if you build row homes or condos or whatever apartments, to not do it. So that's some of the detail work our team has to figure out.
Okay. The other question I had was kind of using your diagram over on the side. In those situations where we have those limiting factors, the high water table, low infiltration rate, I mean, is it a matter of, okay, you just don't have to, you only have to do 95% volume? Or is it going to be like, well, you know what, maybe you build a smaller house? Like, what are some of the outcomes of those situations?
So the idea is to get the same outcome, even if you can't get the same inputs. So if you end up with this situation and you can't meet the letter of the law, because you run out of space, the idea is through a variation process, we could give some relief, but also put conditions on to meet the intent of the regulation. So it'd be a combination of maybe, for example, a condition might be, well, you know, you asked for a lot of relief under the code, but we're only going to give you some relief, so you're going to have to shrink a little bit of the house. And in addition to that, we want you to work on overflow routes or the way the pipes are designed, and we'll take input from the neighbor and say, okay, how can we make this work so the water's flowing away from the neighbors, not onto the neighbors? It gives us quite a bit of flexibility with our reviewing engineers and their design engineers. It's a concept that we jokingly called the benevolent engineer approach, which is like, because we said so, let's do it like that. It's a little bit of that going in, but really what we're trying to do is provide some relief and still hit the intent and still get the results as if it were there. Did we capture that? We haven't done one yet, so we'll have to see how it actually works.
If you need help, you send them over. The 4900 block of Highland and Bragg will be happy to give our
We can set up a bus that just
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Christina Namari. I'm at 4914 Bryan Place. What's once you have the systems in place, I'm assuming there's maintenance that needs to be done to make sure they're still functioning. So my concern would be you have homeowners do this and then 10 years down the road, maybe they're not working anymore because they're clogged, or, I mean, is there any kind of requirements for people to maintain them after they're put in, and to make sure that they stay in and that they stay working?
Yes, the code will require maintenance activities. And you saw in the video, they talked about a clean out. That's the idea of go in there, look, make sure that it's not clogged, make sure it's maintaining the storage capacity, do any clean out necessary. I'm sure that'll be a component. I believe there's some elements of that already in the county code that we follow. It's primarily aimed at private, larger scale detention basins, but the concept already exists.
And what are the enforcement possibilities if, for whatever reason, the property owner is unwilling or unable to take those steps necessary to ensure performance?
Then we invite them to a DuPage County Circuit Court and have a judge help us with that.
Thank you. Yes, good evening.
Well, thank you very much. Jim Garst, 5234 our court. First, I'll say, Jen, my wife and I, Jenny, we've been kind of watching this process, and Dave, when I saw the proposal, when I got emailed to me this morning, I was a little astounded at how simple and elegant the solution looked compared to the process. Anybody who wants to talk about what this process has been, it was very, very complicated. And had a lot of very complicated variables, and I was very impressed with kind of the elegance of what this proposal looks like. On the topic of the factors, the kind of the exception process, what does kind of the ongoing monitoring of that process look like? How do you know, for anything like this, it says after a year, you know, what kind of review processes are there to make adjustments based on what you learn, you know, after putting something like this in place?
Yeah, there's generally two ways we go about that kind of monitoring. One is very informal. In cases where we're pretty confident based on track record and types of issues, we would just say we're confident that'll work, and we'll work on a complaint basis. That if something goes wrong, the neighbor, the owner will tell us, alert us to it, and we'll go back and look at it. So that's very informal. The other way is something that we're not exactly sure how it's going to work, or we have some concerns, and then we put in formalized mechanisms for review. Usually you see this on land use cases, like what we'll say, well, you can operate and then under these conditions, but you got to check in with us in 6 months. Formal review process, either by an advisory board or by staff or by the village council, and we reserve the right to change the conditions of operation.
And that's for like an individual, what about the kind of the program as a whole?
Oh, we'll be constantly monitoring the program as a whole.
Well, as I understood your question is a little bit differently, is in terms of variations. So after a year, you want to know how many variations have there been?
Oh,
What
got it.
nature of the variations been?
Variations.
Right, how many have been applied for, how many have been granted, how many have been denied, which this would all go through the Stormwater Floodplain Oversight Commission.
That's the plan.
So there'd be a public process where the person would have to ask for the variance. But we would certainly keep track and would be able to report out how many variations have been requested, of the type of variation has been requested, what's been granted, what's been denied, and keep track of that just through the petition-driven system that would go through Stormwater Floodplain Oversight Commission.
And on those petitions, unlike the Zoning Board of Appeals, the council makes the final decision on these variations. So every one of them requires a council-authorized ordinance, so they're very transparent.
That board would make a recommendation after public hearings to the village council, then would hear, yes.
Should be able to see them all. And we do an annual report, and frankly, if we get into this and it's not working like we expected and meets the council direction, we will immediately call timeout and represent it.
Which actually, this is a little bit off topic, but when the stormwater utility first went into place, there were requests for variations and exceptions and whatnot, and you learn things from that process, and you take that information and make adjustments if appropriate, if it's not working the way you expect. Thank you. Please, yes.
I second everything he said, but then I wanted to ask about the inviting the builders and the architects and the engineers. Are they invited to a council meeting, or is it a separate meeting where they express their...
Our vision right now is just invite them in and talk at a very technical level with staff. If you'd like to be invited and see that and be part of it, we'll invite you as well, or anybody else who's interested for that matter. They tend to be incredibly technical, very much in the weeds. So Nan and her team, Stan and his team, I can sometimes follow it, but it does get very technical very quickly.
But more importantly, any input that was derived from those meetings that would drive any proposed changes to what's up here would be discussed first before anything was done.
Thank you, Mayor.
Or at least it would be reflected in any proposed ordinance before we finalize it.
One other comment, back to the public system and moving quickly, whatever that means. If I go on and I look up the 2014 and 2018 examples of projects, would that be indicative of how you're moving under the public system?
Yes. So you'll find that between 2018 and 2024, there are multiple projects planned for this era, including a potential bond issuance in 2019 or 2020 to fund those projects.
Along those lines, we also try to work with other agencies whenever we can. So for example, if DuPage County has funds that they've received for some kind of a IEPA or similar grant or a FEMA grant or something like that, there may be opportunities for water quality projects, which could free up some funds that might help us do some things a little sooner than we otherwise would. That's obviously nothing we can plan on, but we're always keeping our eyes on that. If there are opportunities to work in conjunction with other agencies that might allow projects to happen sooner or happen at all, we like to have things that are identified as shovel-ready, at least in concept, so that we can get those funds if they become available.
I will look at those and try to discern what I'm looking at. I'm very interested, again, with where I live, the block I live on, what we do in the springtime there. And so I'm interested in the 8-inch pipe or the 10-inch pipe or whatever it is that flows down Rogers Street. That's part of the infrastructure now. It is inadequate to handle our neighborhood, and whether that's been addressed, as well as, I would assume a third of the community that doesn't have any stormwater. So I'll look for that. Unless somebody would want to comment, anybody know anything about that particular pipe?
Yeah, I can't comment about that pipe, but I do want to add a little bit of context to the building out of the public system. My understanding is that the report from 14 and other reports are sort of a long-term list of desirable projects to be done. But this council every year approves a budget that includes a list of specific capital projects that will be done the following year. So as far as finding out what capital projects will be performed in 19, The budget that we'll pass this upcoming summer, going into the fall, will list which ones from the larger list will actually be done each year. And I think we said a minute ago, many of them require bond issuances. So the stormwater utility by itself, without issuing bonds, is not sufficient to do the projects. So we will decide where to do these 18 projects, these 14 projects at X dollars, and that's included in the budget. So that's where you see whether your neighborhood is included in the upcoming year or not.
That's helpful, thank you.
Let me add to that for a second, just to be the wet blanket, Vince. This is, we're a little bit off of the subject for tonight, but this issue of the public system and its improvement pace, it's decades.
Oh, I know.
So,
I understand.
just for perspective, that what they, kind of the theory, in 11 years, we've done $30 million approximately worth of work, and there's probably, it was a little bit of an 80-20 process. There was a big number identified. We tried to start where we got the most bang for the buck. But if we spent at that same pace, you're still talking about 3 or 4 decades before the full list was even attempted.
My concern is that it doesn't slide to a different room and it's not even discussed. That's a bigger concern to me.
I think that everybody sitting at this table will tell you that's not going to happen.
Fine.
Now we have an 100-year rain every couple of years.
Right.
Every couple of months.
I don't know if somebody wants to give the speech that we've heard before, because we have the same 10-inch pipe situation on Grove, and we spent a lot of time talking about where does the water go downstream of the public system, because one of the main obstacles for Downers Grove is the size of the creeks, actually taking the water out of town, and which is why we were so, I don't want to say amped, I'm not cool enough to say the word amped, for a solution that required like on-site detention, because there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of places for the water to go right now. So that did get talked about a bunch.
Yeah.
Not that we don't still have to do all of the projects.
Thank you. Other questions or comments at this juncture? Obviously, we're still in progress. Yes, please.
6140 Boundary Road. A question, 100% storage, so every drop of rain that ends up on an individual property will never leave. Is that your definition of 100% storage?
No.
Okay.
So the 100% refers to the volume required. We try to stay away from using terms like store for the 100-year event, because as the mayor joked, it's actually true, we have several 100-year events, which is what you would expect. Somebody ought to change the naming of that system. But the idea here is that you would provide 100% of that required volume.
Okay.
What it doesn't mean, you'll never really be able to capture every drop of water from a site, because there are just limitations of how the topography works, and even if you have 100% detention volume, it doesn't mean every drop of rain gets captured in this basin before it leaves the site. We started this conversation many months ago with the net zero impact concepts, and that's where it got very complicated, as Jim and Jenny were talking about. So no, it's not perfect. There's still going to be some runoff that starts on one property, moves to another. So that's why it will never solve all issues.
Because it's still connected to the public system, as you said.
Some are connected and some aren't.
That's coming off and going into the public system.
Right, so if you picture even in our diagram here, there'd be some water, let's say, on a rainstorm, let's say that water hits, lands here, it's probably not going to go into these basins, it's probably going to hit and just roll off. And basically on the edges, and the more topography you have, the more likely that portions of the property will not be captured. But in an overall system, it does provide the required volume, so you get that deluge. You're talking about storing a lot of water, but yes, some still does run off to the neighbor. Appreciate that opportunity to explain that. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from the audience? Thank you on behalf of my colleagues for being here, and appreciate all the really good questions and comments and terrific discussion. Any last comments, questions, at this juncture from members of the council? I think the direction was pretty
Yes, thank you.
straightforward.
Very straightforard, thank you.
I just want to
Phrase
offer
tonight.
one more very small metaphor.
Uh-oh.
This is what we
We're
saw
doing
here.
so well.
This is very, very, very quick. What we saw tonight from the staff's presentation is literally the iceberg, where there's a little tiny bit above water, and 95% of the work we didn't see tonight. So that's, I just wanted to say again, that the ability to take so much data and compress it into something that's elegant, that's the right word for it. This is a truly elegant solution, and I'm very impressed. Thank you.
All summed up. If there's anything more that you need from us, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Okay, I move the council adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you and good night.